Hello and welcome to this particular video. My name is Will, and in this video what I want to do is to go over the fundamentals of how to utilize Visual Studio. How to use Visual Studio. In particular, I'm going to be walking you guys through Visual Studio version 2022. So without much further ado, let's get right into this tutorial. As you can see on the right hand side, I have a bit of an agenda ready. We're gonna try and go through as many of these points as we can in this video, and it's gonna be a really, a basic introduction, a fundamental, if you were, introduction of how to use Visual Studio 2022. It should equip you by the end of this video with a sound working knowledge of how to use this IDE. Of course, if you come from a background of using Visual Studio, maybe not in too much particular depth, or maybe you're a complete novice with Visual Studio, this video is sure to help you out. So first things first, what you want to do, I'm going to take you through the basics. We're going to go through everything from making a new project. We're going to go through the Solution Explorer, the XAML, everything up to there, and even we're going to go through NuGet, which are like the plugin manager, if you like, of Visual Studio, such and so forth. So let's not beat around the bush, let's get straight into this. So making a new project. What you want to do is create a new project. Make sure you have Visual Studio 2022 installed on your computer. What these project templates are, they are sort of configured fronts for you to create certain applications. So what we're going to do here in this particular example, we're actually going to stick with the Universal Windows project type, or UWP, Universal Windows Platform, better said. So if you go ahead and if you need to filter down to CSharp, Windows, and UWP, we're going to go straight into this blank app Universal Windows project type, which is a project for a single page UWP app that has no predefined controls or layout. We're really going to start from a blank canvas. And remember, this is not really a tutorial on coding in C# per se. This is how to use Visual Studio. Now, Visual Studio is going to tell us to configure a new project, and this is where it could get a little bit confusing. What I tend to do here, I keep the solution and the project name the same, but if you're going to have multiple projects in one solution, then I would suggest that you might want the solution name to be unique. But for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to call this, we're going to start at the top, project name. And when we get into what the Solution Explorer does, we're going to kind of explore solutions and projects themselves. But for now, sort of take it at face value. Project, give it a name. So we're just going to call this UWP demo. Keep it very simple. And I tend to keep this checkbox unchecked. Place solution and project in the same directory. I like to keep it as it is. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create. And now what before Visual Studio starts to generate the project, what we need to do is target a Windows 10 version, or Windows 11 even. If you're running Windows 11, make sure you're targeting the Windows 11 builds. So the target version, I leave it at, as of this recording, 10.0 build 19041. And the minimum is Windows 10 version 1809 10.0 build 17763. You want to go ahead and hit OK. Usually the presenter defaults is the one that's best for your machine. But again, if you're running Windows 11, make sure you're targeting Windows 11. And the project is being created right now. And now you should be met with this screen. It's kind of a splash page. It's kind of a landing page. And now I'm going to just tick off making a new project. Okay. Because what we have done, we've built our project, and our project resides in our solution. So I'm going to go ahead and just expand this a little bit. So I'm going to do my best to go in order so as to not confuse what's going on. So, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump ahead. So before we even get to any coding, I want us to be familiar with this screen. So what's going on here? I think it's a good idea to explore, no pun intended, or explore the Solution Explorer. So hopefully it's fairly visible on your end of thing, guys, because I know I fairly zoomed out here as I'm trying to fit two different applications on the screen. Anyway, what do we have here? On the right hand side, as you can see, this particular piece of screen space is for the Solution Explorer. Now you can consider a solution kind of like a box, and in that box you have different, let's say, bags of items, right? So, excuse me, so the Solution Explorer, or rather the solution, represents a sort of monolithic container of your all your projects in this session. And we have made one project for our solution, and this project is called UWP demo, which is the same as a solution. In other, should I say, situations, if you're going to have multiple projects in the solution, you probably want to have a different solution name to all the projects, just to reduce confusion. So we're going to go ahead and expand the project, and we have some things here. We have properties, references, assets app.xaml, main page.xaml, or yeah, that's correct, and pack appx manifest. We also have down here our properties panel as well. We can see some properties pertaining to this particular solution. As you can see, solution properties. So first things first, one of the first things you're going to want to do when you're using Visual Studio is to be familiar with the main page.xaml, and you can find that here in the Solution Explorer. You can click this little arrow here to expand it, and if you double click main page.xaml.cs, you're going to be greeted with a scripting space. That's going to bring us to the C# scripting window area of the screen. Everything here you see with all the code, this is where you write your C# syntax. I made another video about the fundamentals of C#, going into detail about how you actually structure a C# file, so go ahead and watch that video. I'll see if I can leave a link to it in the description. But this space, as you can see, all of this is dedicated for scripting your C#. And the next thing we're going to look at, we've already touched on the Solution Explorer. This C# file is tied to another file known as the XAML file, and the XAML file represents the front end of your application. So in order to access the XAML file, again, we're going to want to be accustomed to this Solution Explorer. We're going to double click main page.xaml. They both say main page.xaml, but one has CS, and that signifies the C# file, the scripting file here. But where it says main page.xaml and there's no C# at the end, that's the XAML file. And we're going to see in a hot minute how that looks. That load. Let's kind of start from the top. So one thing you might want to do when you're writing a universal Windows project is you want to target the resolution of the deployed application. Now, in my previous video going over the fundamentals of C#, I speak about the relevance and the view of UWP. What is UWP? It is a universal platform that expands across the scope of Microsoft-based platforms, from their mobile to Xbox, cloud, and desktop, such and so forth. And as such, all these different devices, they tend to output on different resolution of output peripherals, different size monitors, 17-inch laptops, 13.5-inch laptop displays. So what you're going to want to do is sort of optimize the front-end experience for your application. Now, what I tend to do is I like to target the 13.5. I really do hope it's visible on the screen. It's quite hard to see, probably, but hopefully you can make it out. 13.5. And this is on Surface Book 3000 by 2000 scale. It's on 200% scale, so it's quite a hefty resolution if you ask me. I actually prefer to operate on the 100% scale. I usually tend to home in on the 13.3 desktop 1280 by 720 100% scale. And so if I go ahead and click that, you'll see that the screen slightly changes a little bit. So that's just the target resolution, just basically adjusting itself. So that's one thing you can do. There's landscape and portrait modes, but I think you can only really select this depending on the targets. So if I were to say, and I'm not even sure if this is going to happen, if it's going to work. If we go for a tablet target, so let's go 8-inch tablet. As you can see, portrait mode is now selectable. So you can see, it's a bit hard to see this, the front, so I'm going to make it black against. And Yeah, so as you can see, now we have a portrait orientation. I'm going to hit that back to landscape like that. So if you are designing maybe for targeting Microsoft Surface tablets or even the old what is it, Windows phones, is that what they're called? I know they did a thing with Nokia Lumia, but in any case, those run UWP apps. So quite a fun bit of trivia there, isn't it? So if I'm not mistaken, because that was in the Windows 8.1 era. But if I'm not mistaken, yes. So you can target a portrait orientation and landscape. We're gonna stick with desktop over here. We're gonna go back to 13.3 desktop, 100% scale. Now let's work our way down. As we've kind of alluded to, this whole viewport represents the screen, and everything we see is in this white section. So this is effectively the output display, and you can place all sorts of controls. What are the controls you can display? So if we look on the left hand side, we're going to see toolbox, SQL serve, object explorer, document, outline, and data source. For the purpose of this video, we're only going to look at the top one, toolbox. So if I go ahead and click it, it's going to expand a panel. And we have common XAML controls. It's like all the go-to XAML controls, and all of these are every time you load an app on Windows, say Notepad, you have a few things. You have a menu at the top, and you have a white space where you can write your text. This would pertain to XAML controls. So over here you have menu, flyout, you have text box, you have text blocks, and all sorts of things you can use to build the front end of your app. Okay, so there are a couple ways you can go about utilizing these. You can drag and drop. So I'm going to grab this button. So I just drag this button up on the screen. Just going to expand it a little bit, like so. And let's say you want to zoom in. As you would expect, Control, and then you just scroll up on the mouse wheel as you zoom in. Hold Shift, scroll, you go side to side, as you can see. Scroll with just the mouse wheel and you pan up and down. Okay. You can also adjust the spacing of these by just dragging the corners, as you can see. And if you want to change the orientation of the panels, you have here 3 very small split buttons: vertical split, horizontal split, and collapse pane. We're going to go for the vertical split like this. And the reason I'm going to keep it as a horizontal split is because this is the default, so I really don't want to confuse the tutorial. Now, as I drag and drop this button onto the screen, you can also use, and I'm going to expand this a little bit, the XAML space. So this is the XAML scripting space. And as you can see, when after I added the button, within my grid control, it added a button. Now, you can script your button here as well. So this is not really the purpose of the tutorial, but I'm going to do it for the sake of demonstration. So let's make it a text box. So I'm just you're gonna have to take the syntax at face value. I might make a dedicated video on XAML. I do have one dedicated video on XAML, how to utilize ViewBox, the ViewBox control, to make nice responsive UI. Let me know if there's interest in some more dedicated XAML videos. It seemed that that video was quite popular, in that people were quite intrigued to learn about a little bit more about XAML. For your XAML, you can script here. So I prefer to script my XAML controls rather than dragging and dropping. You can do that here in the XAML coding or the XAML scripting window. Okay, now we've gone over the XAML design view. Going to tick that off. We went over the XAML toolbox. Going to tick that off. We added a control via the toolbox. Going to also tick that off. We added a control via XAML scripting. Now, running the software with and without debugging. So what I'm going to do before we hit the next point, I'm going to actually write some functionality. So what we're going to do, I'm going to create a very simple hello world application. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my main CSharp file. In the constructor, what I'm going to do, I'm going to reference my main button, if I can spell correctly. and I am going to change the text. Now, a couple things might be happening right now. We see this box coming up. It's called IntelliSense, and again, it's in our agenda, so I'm not gonna jump the gun. We're gonna get to IntelliSense eventually, but I really don't want to kind of like get ahead of things. So I'm gonna leave that for now, but we will go back to that. But it's good to just make you guys aware. IntelliSense is almost like an AI assistant that it's not even AI per se, but it just basically, it's like an index rather. It's an index of all the members pertaining to the objects that you are coding. So anything I can do with this main button, IntelliSense is going to flag the pertaining members. So what we want to do is modify the text value, or rather the content value, which is a property, equals, and I'm going to say hello world as such. Now this brings us on to running the software with and without debugging. What does this mean? So if you look at the top of your Visual Studio session, you're going to see local machine, and you're going to see start without debugging, Control F5. What we're going to do first is start with debugging. Now there's a particular reason why I'm doing this. So when you start with debugging, what you're doing, you're building the core directories. If I go to the binary section, x86 debug, you see that the folder is empty right now. Let's see what happens after the program has loaded. So I'm going to go back. To like kind of the root directory. So if we go back to bin rather, so say binary, x86 debug, we can now see the empty directory has some folders and files in it. So by running in debug, we're actually building this debug directory, as you can see over here, and we have Apex core. If you want to hold assets such as image files or sound files, you typically put them in the Apex folder, and you put them here in the assets folder. Now mind you, there are two flavors of this. So if we go back to the root and I just press UWP demo, it does say assets. This is not the one I'm talking about. The one I'm talking about is particularly in this debug x86 directory. So you're going to make sure you target the right directory. So bin x86 debug, Apex, and then assets. This is the one you would want. And as you can see as well, our UWP demo, very simplistic demo, is loaded up. The responsiveness is all over the place, but that's fine. So we have the hello world button, doesn't do anything, and the text box over here, you know, QWERTY. That's hello world. Okay, so let's proceed with the tutorial. So that's running the software without debugging. With debugging. Running the software without debugging is the same thing. However, you make sure you press the start without debugging arrow. And what that does, it doesn't load the debugging symbols that are needed to debug the program. Hence, and as a side effect, it actually loads a little bit faster. So depending on what you're doing, you may or may not want to load in debugging. It does depend on the situation. So I'm going to go ahead and cross that out. Adding namespaces and references. So this tutorial is going to assume that you know or you have a working knowledge of namespaces and references. So as you can see, we have all our references here, our system Windows references here, UI XAML navigation, I got XAML input and such and so forth. Let's say you want to add another one. Now I'm going to draw your attention to the main menu here. Again, in this tutorial, we're not going through all the nitty-gritty of every single one of these. That could be a dedicated video, but this is going to be the stuff to get you up to a working start. Day one in the office, you have to understand Visual Studio. That's what this tutorial is for. So, project. You want to go ahead and hit add reference. And you want to go ahead and hit assemblies and framework. Or extensions. It really depends. So this is where all your references are going to be. As you can see, there's quite a few over here. I got Microsoft Visual Studio Interop and such. Universal Windows. There's the Universal Windows SDK is already referenced. So you wouldn't need to particularly go here, as the core SDK is already referenced as it says here. And if you're gonna have anything such as adding DLL libraries, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna cross this out because we've just gone through how to load references, because you have to open this window. This actually ties in nicely to adding DLL libraries. You still need this reference manager, but this time you want to go ahead to browse. And there's a few DLL libraries I have already here. You have to tick the one you want. If it's not here, you have to browse, and it will take you to your Solution Explorer. So if I hit browse, it will take you to your Solution Explorer, where you'd have to find your DLL file, which I have one sitting over here. And you'd press OK. I don't need it for this, so I'm not going to press OK. So that's how you add DLL libraries in Visual Studio. Now, talking about, speaking about adding, plugging in references, why don't we go and have a look at the NuGet Package Manager? If you go ahead and click Tools, scroll down to NuGet Package Manager, and then you click Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. What you're going to see is Visual Studio's Package Manager. And what this allows us to do is to download third-party packages where we can use functionality that's already been written that we can use to help in our own programs. So if you go ahead and hit the Browse panel, or the Browse tab rather, they got so many. It's a world of functionality. It's amazing. Everything from Newtonsoft.json is like probably the most popular NuGet package on this whole market, to slightly less popular ones but still extremely useful, such as Win2D. You can just search it here by writing on the text box up here, this field, and then you'll get your search results down here. So Win2D, as you've seen in many of my other previous videos, I'm quite partial to Win2D for programming simple yet effective graphics for UWP 2D graphics. So that's win2d.uwp. And when you've found one that you're happy with, you go ahead, make sure the version is okay. You add it to the project. So remember, if you have multiple projects, you're going to have to select the one you want, and then you hit install. Okay. There's some more details pertaining to the package over here. Tags, graphics, 2D, drawing, CSharp. Link to the GitHub, I think, is here somewhere. I'm not too sure. Or this is a link to the GoMicrosoft.com page. And yes, so we're going to tick off using NuGet. And that will add it into the references. So if we go back to the Solution Explorer, you would typically find your plugged in package under references over here. You'll see it. If you recognize, this was under the NuGet installed tab, this Microsoft.NET Core.Universal Windows platform. I believe that was already installed, so it would show up here, just in case you want to look at it. Finding errors. Fairly simple stuff on Visual Studio. It's very straightforward, at least for syntactical errors. So let's say, for example, I want to do something here, hello world, and I make a mistake. I forget my semicolon. You see this red squiggly line. I'm going to zoom in, and this denotes an error. If I hover over it, IntelliSense comes up. And IntelliSense basically helps us as a developer to understand what's going on with our code. And it says here a semicolon is expected. It also says it down here in the error list. Over here we have a semicolon expected at line 29 in the main page.xaml.cs file. So here we are on line 29. This is actually adding a debug break, so that's for something slightly different. That's coming up though, so we're not going to focus on that right now. So line 29, there's a semicolon expected. I'm going to rectify my mistake, and no issues found, as you can see. The save icon is here to obviously save your solution. This says save all, so it saves all the projects in your solution. And the single save icon is just to save the one project C# file, I believe. Yeah, the one C# file in focus. In this case, it's mainpage.xaml.cs. So I'm going to actually cross this one off because it's as straightforward as that. finding warnings. So another thing with warnings, let's see if we can make a warning happen. So let's say like public string message. Let's see if this works. Okay guys, so I've never actually like purposefully deliberately tried to make a warning, but here we have one. So if we have the following piece of logic, we're calling a method called function, and function returns a string. While true, we do some logic. We're making an assignment. First things first, the variable x is assigned, but its value is never used anywhere. And over here we have unreachable code, so unreachable code is detected. What a warning is not quite an error, but it's basically saying this line of code, it's not syntactically incorrect, but on a functional level, there's something going on here that you may want to consider as a developer. In this case, we will never reach this return statement as long as this while loop is persisting and it's not being broken. As you can see, there's no conditions to break this while loop, and so we never reach this line of code. So as the name suggests, the Visual Studio is warning. If you click this, it will actually bring it up and hide it. Visual Studio is warning us of this situation. And also that X is assigned but never used. That's what a warning is about. It doesn't exactly break the code, but it's definitely a cause for concern, you could say. So I'm going to say finding warnings, done and dusted. Let's leave this logic here because it will tie into debugging as well, I think. So for now, we'll quickly hit up IntelliSense. So if I go ahead and hover over a member of this main button object, IntelliSense has a description that describes what content is, this particular property that I'm hovering over here. And if we use the dot accessor, IntelliSense will come up and tell us all the pertaining members to the object that we are trying to access respectfully. You can go here. This is a really good way to get familiar with the objects, familiar with the members, and just to explore what you can do. So that's IntelliSense over that. So we're going to go over IntelliSense and cross that out. Debugging, another fun one. Only have a few more. So if we, if I just can rectify this. Let's say, for example, we want to debug what's going on in this function, this function method. I'm going to put a break here. So on this left-hand side of the screen, you see like a red band. I'm sorry, a light gray band. And when you click on a space pertaining to the line number, you're going to get a red dot. This is called a breakpoint. Now, when the code executes, and once it hits the breakpoint, the program will break, and then it will allow you to examine what's going on. And I'm going to show you what's going on, what that actually means. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to run it with debugging. And what should happen is that we should hit our breakpoint. So as soon as the function method is called via the constructor, as you can see here, there's a yellow arrow here to just tell us that we've hit our breakpoint. Now we have some controls at the top. Step into allows us to take things line by line, as you can see. I like step out as well over here, the arrow pointing up. What that does, it will step out of an enclosing functionality. So what's actually going to happen here is that, if I'm not mistaken, if we hit step out, it will still remain in this while loop. And here's the issue. Because what has happened is that this while loop is going on indefinitely. Now, we might be like, what's going on? I don't know. You know, we're just stuck on the blue screen. So what we can do is put a breakpoint on line 38, and we see that if we step line by line, we're just going in circles, depending on the situation. So let's say we just want to return. I'm going to add a return statement here. Actually, better, I'm going to add a break. And that means this line is now reachable. So obviously this logic doesn't really make sense, but it's for the sake of demonstration. Then I'm going to go line by line, go down. It's just applying the code updates. So now the code is stepped into the next line. It's doing the little bit of logic and it's breaking. So when you hit break, it breaks out of the while loop and proceeds with the next piece of logic, which is the return line over here. And with that, we've stepped out of our function method and we should be able to continue with our application. Obviously not the best sort of, it's not the best form of logic, but this is again just for demonstration purposes. So we talked about debugging, stepping through, and finally for this tutorial, for this particular video, the further fundamentals is for another video, which I'm going to touch upon in a hot minute. But monitoring objects is quite important because what happens is that, I'm going to reload this just to make things a bit easier, is as you are debugging your program, you want to really examine exactly what's going on. I'm going to wait for this to load. It's better if I just show you guys and then I can explain. Okay, so the output window basically just tells us a log of what's going on via our in our current debugging session. As you can see, it's telling us that it's loaded the particular directory over here. Error list obviously tells us the errors that are pertaining in our program. Locals is basically what locals has is all the objects in our file in our debugging session that is within the local scope. So if I go and expand on this, it's actually talking about the main class itself, the main page class itself, as you can see. And one I particularly like is the watch list. So with the watch list, you can just literally add the objects you want to monitor, and you can just keep watching them regardless of what scope you're in. So I might want to look at that main button. I can say main button, find it here, add it to the watch list. And then yeah, I can now monitor the members pertaining to the main button while I'm debugging. So if there's any values changing here, I will be able to expose it and I can see what's going on. This variable X, I can watch that as well. So I'm going to just go up and collapse this. I'm going to add X if possible. Let's go within the scope first. So this is a good thing because now if I keep going, I should now be able to add X. Add that there, and as you can see, X has a value of 0. And if this were to change at all, then it will be exposed here too. And you can use this to debug your program. Go ahead and cross that off the list. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for this particular tutorial. Yes, and I do hope you found it quite useful. I just want to quickly plug, which kind of pertains to this further fundamentals, is that as you know on the channel, I am, walking through all sorts of different C# Visual Studio concepts, from coding 2D video games to making general purpose desktop applications. And I am working on a masterclass, which you can see over here. This is just a placeholder website as such. It's the Learn C# Masterclass if you want to launch your C# journey literally from zero. Literally from zero to I can write sound C#. I know what I'm doing. I can utilize Visual Studio to develop the sort of applications that I have, and any information that I don't possess, I know the workflow in order to obtain that information. Because that's the thing with coding. You're not going to know everything. You're not going to know the entire syntax. This course doesn't profess to teach you the entire syntax, but it teaches you the fundamentals such that you can get going building your programs independently. You have value to offer to the table. So more information is on my site, as you can see over here. So do check it out. I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested. And thanks guys for watching. Do feel free to like and sub if you like the video, dislike if you didn't. It will help me understand what I need to do to improve. And thanks for watching. Hope you gained some value. If not, you were entertained by this video. Take care.